Welcome to the fourth breakfast briefing of 2016. My name is Hunter Hill. I'm a member of the BGR Board of Directors and also the chairman of the Breakfast Briefings Committee. We're delighted to welcome BGR members, all of our guests, to this morning's event. We have a number of elected officials that have joined us today, and thank you for attending and for your essential support of our work. Very often you translate BGR's work into results. BGR's mission is to inform public policy making and promote the effective use of public resources, all with the goal of improving government in the greater New Orleans area. To reach this goal, we publish influential, award-winning research and monitor 60 government entities across Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Tammany parishes. Breakfast briefings provide a critical opportunity to fulfill BGR's mission by allowing our citizens and policymakers to discuss issues that affect all of our lives. And because Jefferson Parish occupies a significant place on our dashboard, we are very pleased to be here in the parish today. We hope you will take advantage of the question and answer portion of today's program. See the simple instructions at your table about how to use our Slido app or its website to submit questions. If you prefer to write your question on paper, feel free to do so and then hold them up and somebody will come by and pick them up. And also, if you want to be identified, please include your name. We welcome your ideas for future breakfast briefings. This is going to be the last one for the year, but we've got nothing planned yet for next year, so please feel free to submit your ideas on cards on your table or come up to me or email me afterwards. Would love to hear from you for future breakfast briefing topics. The best way to stay on top of all of our BGR events and our research is to become a member. Financial support from a diverse membership is essential for BGR's work to promote good government. If you're not already a member, we hope that you will consider joining BGR. At your table, you should find some information about membership as well. And now to introduce our topic this morning is Dennis Woltering. You know Dennis as WWL TV's former anchor. He continues to serve our community and is an active member of BGR's board. Please join me in welcoming Dennis.
Good morning. Thank you, Hunter. I'd like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to Iberia Bank for its generous sponsorship of BGR's Breakfast Briefing Series in 2016. Their support allows us to present these events free to the public. Jefferson Parish is changing. Parts of the parish are getting older. Parts are becoming more diverse. In some areas, the household income profiles are shifting, and due to realignments in metropolitan commerce, Jefferson's role as a job creator is evolving. All of these factors play into the overall economic development picture for Jefferson Parish. Here to discuss these changes and Jefferson Parish's economic development plans are Robert Edgecombe and Jerry Bologna. Mr. Edgecombe is a consultant and urban planner at GCR Inc., a New Orleans-based planning and technology firm. He has managed analytical and advisory initiatives in a variety of areas, including disaster recovery, transportation, education, land use, planning, economic development, real estate, and class action litigation. He received his degree in city and regional planning from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and holds certification from the American Planning Association. Mr. Bologna serves as president and CEO of the Jefferson Parish Economic Development Commission, JEDCO. He has led the organization since 2012. He previously served as the organization's deputy director. Since 2000, Mr. Bologna has played a significant role in industry recruitment and business retention efforts throughout Jefferson Parish. He works frequently with the International Economic Development Council to assist communities throughout North America in the development of business and economic recovery plans after disasters. Earlier this year, he received BGR's Excellence in Government Award, recognizing his role in the Jefferson Edge 2020 strategic plan. Thank you both for joining us today. Mr. Edgecombe, we'll start with you.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. I'm grateful for the invitation from BGR to discuss this issue of regional significance. I'm especially grateful to share the podium with Jerry, whose vision and leadership are critical and exciting elements of Jefferson Parish's future. You've all come early this morning, and I have a lot of charts and graphs, so I will make this feel at least like your favorite 8 a.m. economics class. And I will move through these fairly quickly in the interest of time, and certainly should you need or want a copy of the data, I'm happy to provide it. In many respects, Jefferson Parish is in a position of great strength. As the largest parish in the metro area, the second largest parish in the state, it has a strong, large, and stable population, a robust tax base, and a number of regionally critical pieces of infrastructure and assets. But at the same time, the parish, like many suburban communities across the United States, is vulnerable to relatively recent but significant dynamics in regional competitiveness. And my charge this morning is to discuss the ways in which demographic and economic data can illuminate these strengths and challenges, and the ways in which this information is being used with purpose and with clarity by leaders in the parish to develop economic development strategies for the future. Generally, I'm trying to look at the ways Jefferson Parish has changed over the last 5 years or so, and also to set some of these conditions in context with the metro area and with the state. So the most recent estimates from the census indicate a parish-wide population of about 436,000. That, as I said, makes Jefferson the second most populous parish in the state, behind East Baton Rouge. Its population comprises about 35% of the eight parish metro area. Between 1960 and 1980, the population of the parish more than doubled and hovered at around 450,000 between 1980 and 2000. And of course, largely as a result of Hurricane Katrina, Jefferson lost about 20,000 residents, about 5% of its population, between 2000 and 2010. Currently, the parish has, I think, it's about 96% of its pre-Katrina population returned. Compare that to Orleans, where 80% of residents, or the population is 80% of what it was prior to Katrina. In St. Tammany, it's about 130% of where they were before the storm. Metro-wide, it's about 94%. If you look at the table, it will tell you that according to the most recent census estimates, the population of Jefferson Parish has grown by about 3,700 residents. Compared to some of the surrounding parishes, however, as well as growth metro-wide in the state, the growth rate in Jefferson over that period of about 1% has really struggled to keep pace in attracting its share of regional growth. Jefferson's median household income of $49,576 is slightly, though not significantly, higher than the metro-wide figure, and is pretty much squarely in the middle between Orleans and St. Tammany. And in all these parishes, when you adjust the 2010 median income to compare change over 5 years and adjust it for inflation, median income has fallen. In Jefferson Parish, it's fallen by about $1,000 over this 5-year period. That's roughly consistent with what you'd see nationally. It's not as precipitous as it's fallen in Orleans Parish, where it's fallen by about $2,000. Jefferson has, to a certain degree, struggled to attract or retain households in higher income brackets. You don't see a lot of change in these statistics year over year. The needle takes a lot of time to move, but for what it's worth, in 2010, the percentage of households earning over $100,000 increased 3 percentage points in Orleans Parish, and 1.5 percentage points in Jefferson. Jefferson's poverty rate is 16%. That's roughly consistent with where it was 5 years ago, and it's obviously much lower than the poverty rate in Orleans, which is 20%. And as the table at the bottom shows, the median household income on the East Bank is about $7,500 higher than it is on the West Bank. We can measure education in a parish in a couple of ways. First, the educational attainment of residents. It's a coarse but a meaningful indicator of how their residents' educational attainment has equipped and prepared for them for competitive, high-paying jobs. In Jefferson Parish, roughly a quarter of residents over the age of 25 have earned a bachelor's degree or higher. That's about commensurate with the statewide average. It's lower than the same statistics of 36% and 31% in Orleans and St. Tammany. And then secondly, a high-quality public education system is a critical institution in any jurisdiction. It not only prepares students for expanded opportunity, but it serves as an attractor for new residents and for businesses. And by any standard, by any measurement, the public school system in Jefferson Parish has improved by leaps and bounds over the course of the last several years. In the 2010-2011 school year, only 15% of schools parish-wide were rated as an A or a B by the State Department of Education. As of the end of last year, that percentage had increased to 33%. Back in 2010-11, almost 70% of schools were rated a D or F by the state, and that percentage has fallen to 27%. Overall, the system is rated as a C on their statewide report card. For the previous 3 consecutive years, the system had been a B. By comparison, at the end of the 2011 school year, it was a D. So the very heartening news, both in terms of equity and educational outcomes, but also in terms of economic development, is that more students are in better schools throughout the parish. Home prices, as I know you all are well aware, in much of the metropolitan area have grown rapidly over the last several years. There are some indications that this trend is cooling off. And really, of course, there are 2 sort of major dynamics in a robust real estate market. One, of course, is that it's very good for homeowners and very good for parish coffers, but it also does create, in some instances, some dynamics of affordability challenges. So just looking at the data from the first half of 2016 compared to the same period last year, the average price per square foot in Jefferson Parish has risen by $1 from $110 to $111, about 1%. The price per square foot, obviously there are any number of ways you can measure real estate activity, but this is sort of one apples to apples way to do it. The price per square foot in Jefferson is squarely in the middle of that metric across the metro area. The rule of thumb in defining housing affordability for renters is that spending more than 30 to 35% of their monthly income poses some affordability challenges. This is an old rule of thumb. Some people argue that it's antiquated or arbitrary, but it's a good reference point that spending 35% or more of your pre-tax pay on housing expenses for renters creates some issues of affordability. In Jefferson Parish, 52% of renters pay 35% or more of their monthly income in rent. That's lower than it is in Orleans Parish. That's actually roughly consistent with the national average. But also keep in mind that 25% of renters in Jefferson Parish pay 50% or more of their monthly income in housing costs, and by any measure, that is a burden. And as with population, total employment in Jefferson has seen some slight increases over the last 5 years, but these increases have not kept pace with those of neighboring parishes. Since 2010, the parish has gained about 1,800 jobs, growth of just under 1% compared to double-digit gains in Orleans and St. Tammany. The map should look reasonably familiar to you. It's basically a map of employment concentration. Where we are today, the Veterans Causeway area, Elmwood, the Clearview Corridor, and Auctioner should all be pretty easy to identify. Note that the East Bank has 70% of the parish's jobs and 56% of its population. Average wages in Jefferson have dropped by 1% when inflation's accounted for. By comparison, though, in Orleans, wages dropped 8% between 2010 and 2015. Unemployment in Jefferson as of September 16 was 5.9%, and that's compared to 5% nationally. Of course, all those numbers are much lower than they would have been in 2010. The primary source of parish revenues are, of course, sales taxes, property taxes, and license fees. Combined, these sources brought in a total of about $650 million in 2015. That's about $70 million higher than they did in 2011, meaning that there was a steady increase of ultimately about 12% over that period. About 2/3 of local revenue comes from sales taxes, and when you compare just the state, the old 4%, the now 5%, portion of the sales tax, Jefferson brings in twice what St. Tammany does and about $50 million more annually than Orleans. These numbers are a clear source of regional strength and relative strength for the parish, as not only does the overall amount continue to climb, but the ad valorem and sales taxes are increasing at roughly the same clip. So economic development strategies really rely on a full understanding of the strengths, challenges, and the opportunities of a particular area. And I'm going to share what have emerged as strengths and challenges throughout the data, and then hopefully segue into Jerry's information about economic development initiatives in the parish. The strengths are fairly clear and fairly important. Jefferson's size and stability, and its large, durable employment centers, and it has a number of regionally significant economic and transportation assets. Excuse me. Its challenges, like many suburban communities around the country, include confronting evolving preferences in housing, land use, and cultural amenities, particularly in the younger first-time homebuyer market, the new generation of homebuyers. Just consider for a moment that the population of downtown New Orleans, the Central Business District, and the Warehouse District, the population of that area has tripled in the last 15 years and risen by 80% in the last 5 years. That's one anecdote that signifies what everybody agrees is a significant trend in demographics and urban economics, which is roughly styled the back to the city movement. The long-term intensity and direction of these trends are obviously, the jury's still out, but it's clear that Jefferson, like many suburban communities, must confront these challenges through flexibility, through vision, and through a real sense of its own competitiveness. And finally, the great opportunities in economic development rest in aligning Jefferson's workforce and employment sectors with growing industries and emerging priorities. And fortunately, parish leaders have used data and market insights to do just that. And I'm going to focus very briefly on the five focus industries that were identified in the strategic plan that JEDCO has recently compiled and which they will focus on. And I know Jerry will talk a little bit more about this. The five industries are food, beverage, and these are really industry clusters. So they're industries that are constellated under a particular sort of service or identity. So food, beverage, fishing, and seafood. The parish has clear strategic advantages in its assets, its proximity to the supply chain, the low cost of raw materials, and of course the natural resources on the parish's coast. Secondly is water, transportation, distribution, and logistics. Distribution and logistics is obviously a key identity for Jefferson with its vast transportation, its important transportation network and assets. A key issue in this particular industry cluster is the future of the Avondale shipyard footprint and that facility. Third is healthcare. The growth of private systems in Jefferson and public systems in and around New Orleans make this the industry that every parish needs to capitalize on. And Jefferson has identified the programs and initiatives to increase workforce development to support this industry and its sure growth over the next few years. IT systems and products, this is of course highly competitive. It's the industry that every jurisdiction wants to attract and must attract. Jefferson does have a small but growing number of significant firms and looks to capitalize on that growth. And then finally, water, coastal, and environmental industries. This is a sort of interconnected industry focused on engineering and construction, materials providers, dredging, waste management, and the like. And this is significant because this particular industry, water management, has been the subject of significant planning and funding efforts throughout the greater New Orleans region. So finally, economic development is a long-term undertaking that requires deep understanding of local strengths, challenges, and potential, combined with policies and priorities that are focused, flexible, and have buy-in from community leaders. Leaders in Jefferson understand these conditions, and they have developed a thorough and responsive set of plans to improve the parish's long-term economic outlook and the quality of life for its current and future residents. And I will now turn it over to Jerry. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, BGR, for putting on great programs like this and for having me. There are a lot of familiar faces in the audience. I hope that comes in handy when it comes time for question and answer. But what I plan to do today is it's always interesting. We know these statistics. We have them in the back of our mind, but it's always eye-opening to see them in graphs and in color. The beauty of what we've been able to do at JEDCO really for the last 17 years now is use these baseline statistics as a way to develop our economic development strategic plan. Over the last 17 years, the Jefferson Edge, which is the economic development strategic plan for the parish, has undergone several iterations, of which these statistics have always been part of that planning process. And just a quick trip through history, really in 1999, 2000, we started the original Jefferson Edge, a 5-year plan, which took a look at that time where our economy was. In 2005, we were about to undergo an update of that plan when Hurricane Katrina hit. At that time, the parish's recovery plan was incorporated into the Jefferson Edge. And then again in 2009, 2010, the Jefferson Edge was updated once again, largely to incorporate quality of life initiatives. It was at that point where we began to see many of our residents, those on with the disposable income, continuing to leave Jefferson, not only for areas like Atlanta and Houston, but also within the region, shifting to the North Shore or back into Lakeview. So it became abundantly clear that we had to attack some of those quality of life issues, those being our education system, beautification efforts, levee protection, insurance. Those were all incorporated into the last Jefferson Edge. And then fast forward to 2015, when we did our last update, which put us back into what I would consider traditional economic development, the clusters that Robert identified, and I'll get into that. If we'll just a note on the Jefferson Edge, we had over 100 stakeholders. I think that's one of the things that has always made the Jefferson Edge successful, is we bring in over 100 elected officials, business community, civic individuals to take part in that planning process. we've identified 46 implementation items, those items which go to attack some of the trends that we've identified, and I'm happy to say that within the first year of a 5-year plan, 98% of those items are already in some form of progress. The last thing I'll say about the Jefferson Edge on the planning side is we were lucky to have GCR update this plan for us once again. They were also instrumental in updating, or actually in the original creation of the New Orleans Business Alliance's Prosperity NOLA plan. So the fact that we had the same group do both plans really allowed us to identify some synergies and avoid duplication. So both parishes are really working together on that front. Robert touched on the clusters, those 5 clusters that we think where we see the most potential for job growth in the parish. I would just touch on healthcare because I think it's the sexy one right now, especially destination healthcare, and the water, coastal, and environmental industries, which really is where the most job growth is predicted over the next decade. On the cross-cutting issues, we identified those 5 issues which cut across industry lines. Those issues which impact all of our companies. That starts with permitting. For years, we have identified problems with our permitting process in the parish, and we've worked with the parish administration to help streamline that process. There was no reason why developers wanting to do major projects had to get in line with people trying to pursue garage sale permits or fence permits. The new administration has implemented some changes. I'm proud to say that's moving in the right direction. Marketing and market expansion. I'm going to touch on this in a little bit. Churchill Park in Fairfield, that has been one of the big focus areas for JEDCO, as our office is out in the Avondale area. This presents one of the last great opportunities in Jefferson Parish. The East Bank, as you know, is totally built out. There are some redevelopment opportunities, but in terms of green space and new development, Churchill and the Fairfield area really present us one of the last opportunities for that in Jefferson Parish. Workforce development and mobility became one of the issues that we highlighted. And finally, building stock, both on the commercial and residential side, and I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive into that in a minute. So now what I want to do is really, I mentioned we had those 46 implementation items. I'm not going to hit on all 46, thankfully, but I do want to, I think, highlight the 5 that are most pertinent to this audience and some of the big efforts that we have before us. First is identifying a new use for the Avondale shipyard. Those of you that are familiar with the shipyard know that it had 6,000 employees just 6 or 7 years ago. It is hard to replace that when you lose that type of employer. But this has been our focus area for the last 5 years. This process has, I will say it in public, I feel like it was mismanaged from the beginning by the owner of the shipyard. There were a number of machinations that they went through. They were going to first shutter the yard, then they were going to try and keep it open as a fabrication yard, then they wanted to sell it, but then they didn't list a price, and now they've listed a price, and a lot of people think it's overvalued. So I will say this on the Avondale shipyard, though. It presents a great opportunity for a terminal operator or some sort of freight operation because of the size of the yard, because of the way the yard is configured. There is a lot of value-added processes that can take place there. And we are working with multiple parties, and I will say that for the first time in 5 years, I feel very positive about the momentum that this project has, and I'm hoping we'll get some news out of this soon. It will never reach, I think, that 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 job threshold, but if we can get 2,000 jobs there, I think that's a home run for Jefferson Parish. Moving forward, we want to encourage and market the diversity that makes Jefferson unique. I think this is a real focus area for Jefferson. We are a very diverse parish. Our school system, I believe, has the most students that are non-English speaking as their primary language. We want our businesses to seek opportunities internationally. We are helping a number of our companies to export their products. A lot of our larger companies, Latrim, for example, does a good bit of international and exporting, but there are a lot of small companies, a lot of our food manufacturers that have great opportunities before them to export their products and market to a larger audience. This is what was really behind the parish's efforts to work with GNO Inc. and work regionally to attract more of the international flights into our airport. We have gone from no international flights to now, I believe, 6 or 7. We have San Pedro Sula, we have Panama City, we have Frankfurt, Germany, we have, and now the latest with London Heathrow. The parish was very instrumental in helping the region to secure those flights. As well, JEDCO has been working to translate many of our materials to speak to our population and our changing demographics, and that's something that we will continue to do here in the future. Address our workforce mobility challenges, particularly by advocating for improved transit connections and travel time to job centers. There has become less reliance on our historically utilized methods of transportation, and Robert hit on this a little bit when talking about the younger generation. There's certainly more desire to use public transit, bike lanes, even walking. People want to live where they work now. So we've been working with Jefferson Transit. I know Daryl's here in the audience, and RTA. Some of the low-hanging fruit, things like developing just day rates where we don't have to have our people paying transfer rates. But we're also looking at altering some of the routes. It is imperative that we make this transit system truly regional with regional transit and Jefferson Transit. I'll give you one example, and it's the one that we cite most often. At Oshner, you have almost 14,000 employees. You have a Claiborne line that truncates at Claiborne. You have a Causeway line, even within our own parish, that truncates at Jefferson and Causeway, and then a Jefferson line. Why couldn't we make a node of transportation at Oshner and have all three there? It would provide a much more seamless opportunity. And it's not just for the employers, it's our educational institutions, it's linking our community colleges and our educational institutions with those centers of employment. On the housing front, again, Robert touched on the fact that there are different desires in the housing choices now. In Jefferson, for better or worse, we're blessed with post-World War II construction, mostly 8-foot ceilings, brick houses, and it's not what the younger generation is desiring. So this garnered a lot of attention during the EDGE planning process, and one of the implementation items is to establish a blue ribbon committee to tackle housing and develop a suite of recommendations. I'm happy to say of all of the implementation items, this one's probably the furthest along. That plan is being, the Blue Ribbon Group has met over the last several months. The plan is being finalized this month. It'll be presented to the JEDCO board in January, and then we will begin implementation. I'll joke here that as we try to attract a younger population, that's why you'll see former parish president Tim Coulon prominently displayed in this photo, but he has been an instrumental part in this Blue Ribbon Committee. And what we are trying to do, especially, is bring some millennials into this conversation, bringing the banks into this conversation. How do we develop a suite of recommendations, financing programs to get our homeowners to invest in their homes, to bring them up to modern standards. And we're looking at a number of items within that effort. Then the final of the 5 that I just wanted to talk about, because it's one that has generated significant interest, is just the Jefferson Highway improvement. And many of you know Oshner has announced $400 million worth of capital improvements, and they're plopping those right into our parish. JEDCO has been working with the parish, with the Urban Land Institute, and with Ochsner as to how we design that corridor to maximize those opportunities. Ochsner has gone vertical with their main hospital tower. They're doubling the size of the cancer center. They're building the rehab hospital, considering a center of excellence on organ transplantation. And this also speaks to the international nature of what we're doing here and marketing this region, bringing in patients from countries and new dollars into this community. This is going to bring another 3,000 jobs expected into the region, high-paying jobs. And I think this will be one of the catalytic projects that the parish has going forward. With that, I'll stop right there in terms of the major initiatives and maybe go to some questions.
All right, thank you both, Mr. Edgecombe and Mr. Bologna. We do have a few questions from the audience, and I'll start with you, Mr. Bologna. What can you tell us about the positive opportunities at Avondale?
I think what we don't want at Avondale is a tank terminal. We want the opportunity that's going to create the most jobs. Again, we had 6,000 employees that were separated from Avondale that are highly skilled, and most of them we know are still in this market. And so we're looking for that opportunity that's going to create the most jobs. I think that's going to be as a combination of a freight and warehousing and logistics terminal, as well as some value-added manufacturing. And that could be pipe manufacturing, threading, coating, and other. You know, the Port of New Orleans, people know, largest importer of steel, rubber, but none of that material stays in this market. It all comes in and ships out right away. And the more of the value-added process that we can attract here locally, the better off we are going to be on the job creation side.
All right, Senator Conrad Appel is asking, according to the newspaper, 5 of the top employees in JP are government. This is not a metric of a strong economy. Besides Avondale, what prospects to reverse this are there?
Thank you for that, Conrad. I appreciate it. Well, I would say that we are blessed with a number of large employers. Jefferson is a strong economy in that we have a diverse industry. We are not beholden to any one industry, much like the oil and gas industry in the 80s. We have a number of large contractors, a number of IT firms, but we are not an economy. We don't have too many of the Ochners or the other hospitals that have thousands of jobs. Jefferson is primarily a community of small businesses, and that's what I think keeps us healthy. Our job creation is coming from our small businesses. And any economic developer will tell you that 85% of your job creation is going to come from your mom and pops or your small businesses that aren't coming in and bringing 1,000 jobs at a time. They're creating 2 and 3 at a time, but that's where your job creation is coming from, and we've been successful in that model. But I would add to that while we have been successful with that model, we have had great success in bringing in new employers. We had a new call center come in this year with 300 employees. When I started at JEDCO 17 years ago, a 300-person call center would have been a home run. It would have been made our entire year, and we could have, gone home and been fat and happy. But those projects are coming much more fast and furious. We completed another $1 billion in foreign direct investment with the Dyno Nobel plant this year. There's a litany of projects across a diverse field, and I'll leave it at that.
And I also like to add, just from sort of the perspective of what information looks like and what data bears out, that it's really not uncommon for government agencies to represent some of the largest employers in any particular jurisdiction, and that's local, state. You'd see this a lot of the same results in a lot of different communities, many of which would be considered quite healthy.
All right, Claude Schlesinger is asking, what are the growth prospects for the West Bank? Any impact from the Huey P. Long Bridge or Avondale?
Me again? All right. It's like the hot seat here. I think, of course, when the Huey P was being constructed, the vision was to have the West Bank play a particular role in the job creation and future of the parish. That unfortunately coincided with the closure of Avondale, so that didn't seem to materialize in the first couple of years. Elmwood, in contrast to that, Elmwood has seen an uptick. I think the traffic counts would show you that there are more people coming from the West Bank into Avondale for food and beverage offerings and quality of life services. We're working hard to change that. It's why JEDCO moved out to the Avondale area. It's why we have put that focus on the Churchill Business Park. Delgado will be constructing their new River City campus. That will bring another 3,000 students a week into the Avondale area. At the same time, the parish is moving forward on a multi-sport complex in that same area. We have a number of major anchors in that area. Now we have to infill that with more of the jobs.
And I'd also add that the parish took really a hard, critical, and innovative look at the West Bank in a study a couple of years ago. And besides the projects that Jerry mentioned, sort of the keystone projects, right in different parts of the West Bank, particularly in the Avondale area, the parish has really sort of, I think, come to an understanding of how strategies by which the more populated areas of the West Bank can be, revitalized over time. It's a generational process, but they're certainly attuned to it.
All right, member of the audience is asking, has removing the tolls on the Crescent City connection had any positive effect on commercial activity in the West Bank of the parish? Do you want to start with that, Mr. Edgecombe?
Sure. I don't really have any numbers, that substantiate that or discredit it one way or the other. Certainly the free flow of egress and ingress into and from the West Bank, would certainly seem to favor the West Bank. I think it'll take time for the full, results of that policy change to take effect. But it's I think something that population and sales tax and other types of data will bear out over time.
I would echo that. We don't have any statistical information to suggest, no businesses have indicated to us that they're adversely affected or positively affected.
You talked about the water coastal area environment being a huge growth opportunity. What kind of businesses and industries do you see coming into the parish to do those kinds of jobs? And what kinds of employment do you see?
Yeah, I think a number of our existing employers play into this industry. Certainly, our engineering companies have an area of expertise related to the oil and gas industry that would play as we focus on coastal restoration. I think a number of our construction companies and fabricators also play into that. So that was one of the reasons we decided to focus on this, is because we have some anchor employers who we think can play in that arena.
What areas, if any, are being targeted for arts and entertainment, given that this would appear to be a driver for redevelopment in Orleans Parish?
We have not, as an organization, placed much focus on arts and entertainment in the past, realizing that it's certainly a driver of quality of life. It's not been an area that we have identified much in the way of permanent job growth, so it has not been a focus area of ours.
Okay. Tony Legee of JBC is asking, with mom and pop businesses being a strength in Jefferson Parish, what effect are internet sales having on that segment, particularly retail? What are prospects for reversing any trends negative to mom and pop businesses?
Well, that's certainly a concern. It is not lost on us. And with a number of our retailers articulating the fact that they are adversely affected. They are at a disadvantage. They are invested in the community. They are paying taxes. Yet their employees, time is taken when people come into the storefront, want to ask questions about their product, and then they go home and order it on the internet at an 8 or 9% discount right off the bat. It is something we have been working, and I'll give much of the kudos to the Jefferson Chamber and other organizations that have been advocating for a policy change. But it's imperative that our federal government take a long look at the internet fairness.
What have the barriers been to achieving a true inter-parish public transit system? Why aren't we further along?
Do you want to take that one? I will just add that I am totally new to that conversation. While I was aware of the lack of a regional transit authority, or a truly regional transit authority, it wasn't until it came up in the EDGE planning process last year that I figured maybe we'll inject ourselves into this conversation. If we're not going to do it, it doesn't look like it's getting done. So I'm happy to work with the parish to see. And I will say this: the Regional Transit Authority has invited JEDCO to sit in on some of their planning that's taking place right now. So there does seem to be some increased dialogue that we're very excited about.
Yeah, I would just add to that, sort of echoing Jerry, that there are a few shared routes, especially in across Jefferson and Orleans. Jerry mentioned a couple of them during his presentation. It's a complicated piece of infrastructure to integrate across different jurisdictions, where you have not only different leadership and different priorities, but you also have much different land use patterns, much different sort of historical relationships with public transit, and that integration just takes a lot of time and a lot of vision. And I think we've made progress over the last few years, even as RTA in Orleans has really been focused on a couple of key signature projects, as well as just the restoration of its own service.
Rodney Stone of the Stone Group is asking, how does diversity, equity, and inclusion manifest itself in Jefferson Parish moving forward?
I think it is one of the areas of focus, as I mentioned. People don't realize, for example, in the city of Kenner, they have the largest Honduran concentration of population outside of Honduras. Jefferson is no longer a suburb. We are not a suburban parish. We are an urban parish. It's again imperative that we act that way, that we include our people, and it's one of the efforts we have made is to expand entrepreneurship, to diversify the people that we are fostering in entrepreneurship to help our companies.
Anything? Both RTA and Jefferson Transit are operated by TransDev. It would seem that that would allow for much better coordination. Have you seen anything like that?
Just to expand a little bit on that question, yes, they are both managed by the same manager, but there are certainly different patterns. There are fare disparities. There are disparities in the frequency of routes, and so it's not as simple as just having the one manager manage that process. There are a lot of in the city of New Orleans, their ridership demands more frequency. In Jefferson, not so much. We can't subsidize that. So there's a lot that goes in. It's a pretty complex situation.
Many businesses rely on incentives. However, the process for approval is quite cumbersome. What effect does this have on economic development in the parish, and what are your suggestions for streamlining the process?
Well, I do have a lunch to get to, but this has become a cornerstone of the conversation. We've just been through 2 special sessions and a long legislative session, much of it surrounding tax incentives and that discussion. I I am a believer in tax incentives, but I am very proud of the way that Jefferson and JEDCO has handled their administration of tax incentives. We do not throw those around lightly. Whenever we've structured local incentives, we've made sure that there are appropriate clawbacks and that it's done appropriately because we take our fiduciary responsibility very seriously. That being said, the industrial tax exemption program is the one most notably that has been changed and is adversely impacting our manufacturers. And if you know anything about economic development, our manufacturers are the last sector of our economy that we want to negatively impact. And that was recently changed through executive order of the governor, whereby a company investing in manufacturing equipment, very specific equipment, could abate the taxes on that equipment for a number of years. That is local ad valorem taxes. The governor, through his executive order recently, made sure that he throws that back to the local government, requiring, in our case, in Jefferson, the parish council, the sheriff, and the school board to approve any of those tax incentives. We've met with a number of our major manufacturers over the last several months, and this is a huge issue for them. Not that they don't want to cooperate with the taxing bodies, but when you have a company that's trying to make competitive decisions and act quickly to keep up with their competition, they do not have months to wait to get through these administrative processes. It's going to hamper their ability, and they would assume expand their operations in other markets. That's going to put us at a competitive disadvantage when they have operations in other areas and they can go expand there.
Okay, this from Mildred Conjemi. We see consistent profit increases with energy companies. Can we do a private-public partnership for beautification?
I'll start, and you can. Yeah, I think I'm not sure of exactly the connection to energy companies, but I know that there have already been some emerging and fairly successful partnerships between. I don't know if they're companies necessarily, but between business organizations and parish leaders for directly aimed at beautification. And part of the, just as an example, the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan, is focused as a, both managing urban water more effectively and more cost effectively, but also integrating it into the beautification and the streetscape, of a particular agency. And that effort is a massive sort of generational effort, but it's one that's already generating a lot of different funding strategies and partnerships.
I would just add, I'm not sure in terms of formal partnerships, but I think our utilities in Jefferson, specifically Entergy and Atmos, are great corporate partners, and they support a number of initiatives. I'm not sure about on the beautification side, but we are lucky to have them.
You mentioned healthcare as a destination healthcare as a key cluster. What is Jefferson Parish doing to promote and market that area?
So we have, just in Jefferson Parish, our hospitals see patients from all 50 states and 93 countries last year. People, we don't tell our story well enough, even in this parish. And we're ideally situated between Birmingham and Houston. In Houston, I think one out of every 4 hotel nights is related to their medical cluster. So on that front, we're working on a couple of things. Namely, we're working with Greater New Orleans, Inc. and the NOLA Business Alliance to brand our regional medical infrastructure. That's something where you'll start seeing some more come out of that. But we want to brand this medical infrastructure to really pursue that. Just one specific example today. The University of New Orleans has been pursuing some efforts in China to bring many of the Chinese over to receive health care in the United States. They actually have a Chinese delegation in town this week that is touring some of our hospitals to pursue some opportunities.
Is there any concern that we have overbuilt hospital facilities in this region?
Well, I will say this, I can't speak for any of the others that aren't in Jefferson Parish, but we have strong hospitals in Jefferson that are successful, and I think we have that footprint pretty well laid. I can't speak to the new ones coming online.
All right, thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, gentlemen, for speaking today. And I want to thank Iberia Bank once again. Thanks to Iberia Bank for its generous sponsorship of this breakfast briefing, and thanks to all of you for being here with us today. We hope the event has been informative. If you use the Slido app or the website to submit questions today, please click on the Polls tab to rate that technology. As a member of BGR, I encourage those of you who are not already BGR members to join us. You'll find details in the brochures on the registration table. Thank you so much for being here today. Hope you have a good day.